My name is Milena Ortiz. The second language acquisition research that I selected was First Language Advantage on Second Language Acquisition. During my time in college, I remember professors telling me to avoid speaking L1 to language learners. I never understood why I couldn't use one language to connect the information to the other language when it was so successful for me. I am an English learner. I have been learning and speaking English for 9 years. During this research, I found that the most successful approach for me was cross-linguistic awareness. To be able to understand grammatical rules or the meaning of a word, I had to use my first language and compare it to my second language. I wonder why my professors were so skeptical about utilizing my first language in the classroom. During this presentation, I will provide data that shows positive outcome when utilizing L1 in the classroom. Let's begin with the definition of language acquisition, first language and second language. Language acquisition means absorbing a target language sound, system, and structure without ever thinking explicitly about the language actual structure. In order to speak a language, the EL needs to acquire 5 areas of linguistic competency: phonological, pronunciation of the word; lexical, acquisition of words; semantic, acquisition of the meaning of the word; grammar, set of structural rules to compose phrases or sentences; and pragmatic, the ability to use language effectively in order to achieve a specific purpose and to understand language in context. First language has different names that I will be using throughout the presentation: model language, native language, and primary language. This first language is acquired before the age of 3. L1 acquisition process is described as occurring quickly, easily, automatically, and naturally. L2 is described as the language that is not the native language of the speaker. It is needed for education, employment, and social activity. L2 acquisition process is described as difficult, slow, and as the result of conscious application on the part of the learner. CLA, cross-linguistic awareness. CLA makes comparison across languages, has the potential to develop learners' metalinguistic awareness in ways that may also benefit knowledge of the L1. In this case study, 2 teachers were teaching English in a French school. Both teachers spoke fluent French, and they were aware of the study. The purpose of the research was to see how cross-cultural linguistic references can increase students' understanding during the English instruction. Teacher A was unable to make cross-cultural references during her instruction, even though she had the opportunity to apply them. Teacher B was able to make 7 cross-cultural references during the instruction. Teacher B expressed that the students were enjoying the class because they were able to compare L1 to L2 and make sense of the grammar rules. One of the big issues the teacher expressed was that using CLA is limited to the language the teacher knows. If you have a student in your classroom that speaks Arabic but you have no background in that language, it will be hard for you to use this approach. Positive and negative transfer. Positive transfer facilitates the acquisition of second language. Negative transfer. L1 has a negative impact on L2 and it could interfere in the acquisition of L2. There are a lot of factors to consider if a language will cause a positive or negative transfer. Factors like similarities and differences in the structure of 2 languages, background knowledge of the learner, and proficiency of learners on L2 could interfere with the transfer of the language. Let's take as an example phonetics. If a person can speak fluent Spanish, he or she will pronounce English with Spanish characteristics. This could have an impact on the student accent because they will never achieve a native-like L2 pronunciation. In other words, a learner who acquires an L2 cannot pronounce the words native-like in both L1 and L2. For instance, if a child is learning L2 but he doesn't have a good L1 base, L2 might override L1 pronunciation, restricting the child from pronouncing L1 words native-like. However, An EL can acquire native learner levels of grammatical accuracy in speech and writing. This doesn't mean that will be easy, but depending on the student's first language writing structure, the similar the rules are to L2, the easier will be to acquire. UG, Universal Grammar Approach. According to Noam Chomsky, UG is a system of categories, mechanisms, and constraints shared by all human languages and considered to be innate. In other words, Chomsky believed that humans are born with some grammar structure. According to him, all languages share certain grammatical properties. On the article, Mr. Clenson is investigating if L2 has UG properties that are similar to L1. This question is interesting because people think that learning L2 is the same process as learning L1. As we all know, when learning L1, there is no need to compare what you are learning with another language. When learning L2, you are comparing both languages to be able to make a linguistic connection. One of UG principles that are presented through the learner's first language is that children learn language quickly and effortless on minimal exposure. As you can imagine, L2 is hard to learn, it takes time, and the student needs a lot of exposure. Mr. Clenson investigated the development of verb placement in German. When acquired L1, grammar rules are not taught to children. This shows that L1 acquisition is not presented in terms of UG principles because children do not need to understand grammar rules. But when an adult acquires L2, the same principles cannot be formulated in sense of UG. Due to L2 acquisition involves grammatical rules, it does not meet UG characteristics. On the other hand, Mr. Clenson found that one of the parameters uses children's experiences to be able to learn L1. To acquire L2, adults use their past experiences to be able to learn the language. Maybe an EL is unable to utilize all the parameters that convey universal grammar. But there are UG parameters that are still unused when learning L2. According to the article, it is wrong to say that L2 learners cannot apply any UG principles. Does L1 has benefit in the classroom? This case study was conducted in Colombian International School with an English immersion program from kindergarten. The purpose of the study was to identify if the use of the mother tongue in the classroom increases comprehension and facilitates the second language acquisition process. During this study, the lesson plans were focused on reading skills. Activity A. The first lesson observed was a read aloud activity where the teacher read, "Who will be my mother?" using only English in the instruction and reading time. Activity B. The second lesson observed was a read aloud of A Bottom for Corduroy, but this time the teacher uses code switching between English and Spanish. After observing the class, they compared both of the results, and they found that during the Activity A, the student made a higher amount of interruption than Activity B. During Activity B, the level of participation was higher, which it helped the teacher connect with the students and deepen their understanding. Something extremely interesting that they found was that there was no difference between Activity A and Activity B because the students were able to draw their favorite part of the story using elements from the book like characters and setting. Even though in Activity A there were so many interruptions, it did not interfere with the students' understanding. During reading activity, which it was the focus of the study, the language of the instruction was not a key factor in determining understanding during reading activity. Can L1 help learn other languages? According to my research, it does not matter the language you are learning. The learning process is the same. Each article builds their research based on a different language like German, French, Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese, Dutch, and Spanish. Every article implies that if the language has similarities, it will provide the student with a positive transfer. Positive transfer is not limited to just one language. Does L1 help students improve on L2? We go back to positive and negative transfer. Yes, L1 can help improve L2 if the languages are similar. For instance, learning Portuguese as a Spanish speaker. Tuda Portuguese is Spanish and Spanish are Roman languages. They tend to have similar word pronunciation and sentence structure. So between this language situation, one could help improve the other. Sadly, L1 will not always improve L2. Sometimes it makes learning L2 harder. For instance, when an English speaker tries to learn Mandarin, they will have to learn the language from scratch. Mandarin has pronunciations that are not used in English, making speaking really difficult for ELs. I conclude that providing a rich second language environment by making links to other languages can help the teachers by making learning context more meaningful. It is important for teachers to include the first language in the classroom, maybe by translating vocabulary words to their native language or providing opportunities for the student to write in their first language. I hope many teachers change their mind and start utilizing L1 in the classroom, though that it does not have a negative effect on the students, but it can help the student understand the language better. Here are the references that I use to make my research. Thank you for so much.